Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Happy Hour podcast. Of course, my name's Ray. Matt's not here this week. He's at a wedding. Mike, God knows, Mike's here and there whenever he decides to come in. But we are being joined by our friend from the Laugh Finder podcast, comedian Tommy Sinbazo.
Woo! Hey, what's up, guys? How you doing?
Good. And of course, we are live with our featured guest, author and publicist Howard Bloom. Man, I did all kinds of research on you. I have a bunch of questions about your book and, definitely the publicist stuff. And I mean, like you did publicist work for Michael Jackson, Joan Jett, Prince, you name them, you got them. Was there anybody in particular that you enjoyed working with the most? Like, was there someone that, you knew you had something for, you're like, oh, this is going to be easy. I love, doing this for, any particular person?
Well, Michael Jackson absolutely blew me away. He was unlike any human being, not only any human being that I'd ever met, but any human being I ever conceived, any human being I could possibly imagine. Look, when I was a kid, I got started in theoretical physics and microbiology at the age of 10. And I was hooked into those things by a book that said the first two rules of science are these: the truth at any price, including the price of your life. And it gave the example of Galileo, and it told the story all wrong, but hey, I needed a heroic tale to model myself on. And number two, look at things right under your noses if you've never seen them before, and then proceed from there. Look for things that are invisible to you and everybody around you that you take for granted, and bring them into visibility, and then proceed from there. So the first rule was the law of courage. The second was the law of awe, wonder, and surprise. Michael Jackson embodied awe, wonder, and surprise, plus courage in ways I had never imagined a human being could possibly be, possess, whatever you want to call it. He blew me away. He reset my standards of human possibility. He pushed the envelope of human perception in ways that flabbergasted me.
And just alone, Michael Jackson, just, especially with knowing, he had the ranch, just everything about him was unique. The way he danced, and it's funny, I kind of feel that Michael Jackson, like I always visualize that Michael Jackson, he goes to this local diner, he just goes in and he sits down, and they always make the girl named Billie Jean go on him. And they're like, Billie Jean, go do it. And as soon as he sees her name tag, he throws the stuff on and he starts dancing and doing the Billie Jean stuff and just moving around and, grabbing his crotch. He just acts out the whole entire goddamn song. And then he just sits down and goes, I'll have a hamburger. And it's just, I mean, that's the thing. And it's like, just imagine that, like, Bill, if you have an employee like that, that employee just sits there every time they see Michael Jackson, they're just kind of like, oh no, here we go. He's going to do it again.
Oh, God.
Mom, just take his order tonight.
Right. Well, in reality, Michael would not have been free to do something like that. We were sitting in a van one day on our way to an NAACP meeting that I'd convinced him to address, even though it was against his religion, because the NAACP was working for voting rights, and Seventh-day Adventism, or whatever his religion was, said you cannot get involved with voting. Don't ask me why. I have no idea. But he decided to do this anyway. And we're in this great big black van with the security people driving. And Michael explains to me, you know why I can't get out of this van without my security guards surrounding me? Because the minute I get out and people recognize me, people will crowd around me and they will just want to get one thread from my clothing, one piece of my hair. That's all, because they love me. But human flesh is as weak as an overcooked noodle, he said. And those people, out of good intentions, out of sheer love, will literally tear me to pieces. So Michael could never have gone to that diner, and there probably wouldn't have been enough room between the aisles for him to do his dance. Plus, you have to realize something else. Michael invented a form of dance humanity had never seen before.
Yeah. Without question. Without question.
So back in the 1930s, Black culture is constantly inventing new cultural forms that cost nothing, that they can do out on the street and the sidewalk. And in the 1930s, the brand new cultural form that Black ghetto culture was inventing was tap dance.
Okay.
And Black people were not allowed in films. Films were the exclusive property of white people back in those days. But tap dancing was so extraordinary that some film directors started to incorporate tap dancers, Black guys in a white film. So when you saw these tap dancers, I don't know if you can see my movements. I don't know if you've got my video, but Oh, it says, I got to hit the video.
There you are. Hey, all right.
So in those days, the black tap dancers were essentially apologizing for being in a white film.
Yeah.
So they kept their eyes on their feet because that's where all the action was happening, but their wrists were like this. Their hands were dangling. This is what science is called a submission gesture. In other words, please don't hurt me. I know I don't belong in your film, but I don't intend to hurt you in any way. That's what the gesture meant. And that gesture was so pervasive that when Fred Astaire studied tap dancing and started to do it as a white man, and he was in movies supposed to be wooing Ginger Rogers, he was the least convincing hero in the world. There was no way he could possibly have gotten Ginger Rogers. Why? Because every time he danced, he did what the black inventors of tap dance did when they were first involved in films. He kept his eyes on his feet, and his hands dangled in a submission gesture. Well, submission gesture guys do not get the girls.
Yeah.
It's dominance gestures guys who get the girls. So Michael Jackson introduced the dominance gesture into dancing. He did two impossible things. For one thing, when he was on stage, he pointed with absolute dominance off into the distance. He pointed with absolute dominance into the sky. He pointed with absolute dominance down on the stage. He gave you a sense of total and powerful control. And he did something absolutely impossible and jaw-dropping, which today we take for granted. He danced backwards. He danced backwards with forward movements of his feet. He invented the moonwalk. So Michael was far more original as a dancer than anybody gave him credit for.
That's good stuff. That's good. And you know, Michael, especially with the moonwalk, like the moonwalk is something unreal. And one of my favorite things growing up, of course, you know, I was kind of young when Michael, you know, was in his prime, but I'll never, ever forget Thriller. I think everybody always talks about Thriller. Just that was a movie within a music video like that. Right. That's crazy. And I feel like recently there was a little bit of homage to it that my wife, she's a big Taylor Swift fan. And I think it was Look What You Made Me Do, that video. She was a zombie and it had the whole, and I was like, that totally kind of, I feel like that's a homage to Michael Jackson with that. And I told her, I was like, you know, you don't get people that have videos that are that creative anymore nowadays. You just get people who are just playing their stuff and that's it. I'm like, I can watch that live. Like, I want to see you, you know, jump out of an airplane like DB Cooper while you're like singing or whatever. Like, you know, that's kind of stuff I want to see. Like, you know.
You don't get videos that way in part because you don't get people making that amount of money. Yeah. And Michael sold within a year, he sold 33 million copies of one of his albums. That made him bigger than the Beatles and Elvis Presley combined. And the amount of money that came in from that allowed him to do incredible production value videos, miniature movies. And kids these days, they have no record company to bankroll them. They're up against the problem of how they make a living as a musician at all. They try to go out on tour and they try to establish a relationship with their audience, and touring does that like no other human ritual on the face of planet Earth. And they're lucky to have a trickle of money where Michael had a flood. So they have to use all the creative tools they can possibly find for free. You know, an awful lot is available for free these days, but they can't come anywhere near doing what Michael Jackson did, having a movie budget for a 10-minute video.
Yeah, there will never be anybody quite like Michael Jackson. Now, how was it working with Prince? Now, especially once Prince went into the level to where he was the artist formerly known as Prince, and he turned himself into a symbol. Like that, when were you working with him during that time as well? Like, you know, would that make him harder, Publicist wise? You know, once he started being referring to himself as a symbol, or you know.
Well, I started with him when nobody had ever heard of him.
Okay.
I started with him when he was a sneaky presence in the music industry. By a sneaky presence, I mean nobody knew who he was. Absolutely nobody knew who he was. But he had an album that was climbing on the R&B charts. Now, the R&B charts are just for a Black audience primarily. And most white people in those days did not pay attention to the R&B charts. But not only was his album climbing when nobody had ever heard of who he was, it went platinum, which is fucking astonishing. And then I got a phone call saying Earth, Wind and Fire's manager, Bob Cavallo, because I was working with Earth, Wind and Fire, has a new act, and he'd like to know if you want to work with him. And it was Prince, this totally unknown person who was going platinum on the charts without anybody having a clue as to who he was. Well, of course I wanted to work with him. I knew there was a phenomena of some kind going on there. So my task from 1981 on was to take Prince and turn him into what he deserved to be all along, which is an icon, somebody that you could put pictures of on your bedroom wall when you were 13 years old, somebody who became a role model for you as you grew up, somebody who helped you express your own identity. And these were the years of building Prince. It wasn't until 7 years later that Prince fired all of us, fired Bob Cavallo and me, fired his team of geniuses.
Yeah, I'm just tired of geniuses. Get out. Just get out. And I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was all downhill from there.
Yeah.
Well, it was downhill, but it wasn't downhill because he built this new identity that Chase was just referring to.
Yeah.
And you could see that identity coming to pass. I mean, once upon a time, I was out in Indiana at John Mellencamp's house. And John Mellencamp wanted to show me a film. And the film was HUD with Paul Newman. This is a movie that John Mellencamp had grown up on. And there's the son of a rancher. He's incredibly good looking. He's Paul Newman. And he has a great big white Cadillac convertible. And every day he goes into town, goes to the local bar, picks up wives who are bored and left alone by their husbands during the day, and does what's only implied by the movie with them. And then, and HUD's wealth that supports his big white Cadillac convertible comes from his dad's cattle herd. His dad is a wealthy cattle rancher. And then the feds come to his dad and say, there's hoof and mouth disease in the neighborhood.
Oh.
We're going to have to kill your entire herd of cattle to keep the hoof and mouth disease from taking off nationwide. And so HUD says, oh my God, that's my father's wealth. You know, that's my father's 401k. That's what keeps me going. And he decides to steal the herd of cattle in the middle of the night and sell them. And if he does, he's going to be spreading hoof and mouth disease all over the North American continent. And then he has a crisis of ethics, of morals. And he realizes that he owes an obligation to his fellow human beings. And he doesn't sneak off with a herd of cattle in the middle of the night afterward. So John Mellencamp summarized the movie like this. First, you rebel against your father, then you become your father. So one day I got a call. Prince was going to be performing at a huge arena out on Long Island. And that's in my neighborhood. So I had an opportunity to go. And seeing a Prince concert's an astonishing experience. No two concerts are ever the same. He's one of the most stunning performers I've ever seen in my life. And he's my client. So I have to do everything I can to understand him. And Prince is on stage and he's doing his thing and the audience is going crazy. And then he lays down on the stage and he starts to hump it. And then his body goes totally still. And at first we think this is part of the act. And then after a minute, we begin to panic. We're afraid he's having a heart attack and we think that our obligation should be to rush up on stage and to save him. And then suddenly, from 6 stories high in the roof of this huge arena, there comes a voice. And it's the voice of God talking to Prince. And of course, that's Prince's other voice, the voice of God. That's a voice speaking within, guess who? Prince. And so I'm watching in front of my very eyes the transformation that John Mellencamp was talking about. For the last 7 years, 6 years, Prince has been rebelling against his dad. That's what's made up his phase 1 personality.
Yeah.
And now he is becoming his dad. That voice of God is the voice inside of him. And then I got a call saying, you got to be out here tomorrow morning. We're showing Prince's new film, Under the Cherry Moon, to Warner Brothers. It's a big theater where kids have a little dial at their seat where they can dial up for scenes they like and down for scenes they don't like. And you got to be here and tell us if we've got a movie. So I flew out to LA. I went to the movie with Prince's managers. It was an extremely satisfying film. It was a delightful film. It didn't have the depth and power of Purple Rain, which is a whole other story. But it was a good film. And 2 weeks later, so I told Prince's managers that. That's why they had me out there, to validate them or tell me that this is full of crap. And 2 weeks later, I got another phone call. And they said, you're not supposed to know this. But Prince has just changed the ending to his film. You're not supposed to see it. You've got to come out here and see it immediately. So I flew out to California. I waited until the office building of Prince's managers had closed for the night because we were sneaking me to see this film. They put me in a room closet with a little VCR machine and a 9-inch television screen. And I watched the new version of Under the Cherry Moon. And in the end, Prince kills off his hero. And you have just spent 90 minutes investing yourself in this scamp that Prince is in this film. And then in the end, you don't get the payoff of his getting the girl. Instead, Prince dies when his motorboat explodes. It's so radically unsatisfying, it's ridiculous. But here's why Prince had to do that. The voice of God was beginning to speak to him and saying that scamp that you have been for the last 7 years is illegitimate. That scamp is sinning against God. And I, God, am now taking you over. I, God, the voice of your father, the voice within you, is now taking you over. So these two incidents announce that Prince was going through the Mellencamp transformation and going from rebelling against his father to becoming his father. And that's when Prince lost his identity and became the artist formerly known of Prince.
Yeah, with the whole symbol. That was when the symbol came up, right? And I was kind of thinking about this, like the whole stuff that we're going through today with the whole gender neutrality stuff. Really, was that kind of Prince just identifying himself as a symbol? Like, I want to be considered a symbol. Like, what is that pretty much what a little bit like before what we're seeing now is someone like, I want to be identified. You're going to refer to me as a broom. Okay. Well, if you don't refer to me as a broom, we're going to have an issue.
Right. Well, I was gone at that point. In 1988, I became hideously ill and was stuck for the next 15 years in bed, and with 2 weeks to talk for 5 years and 2 weeks to have another person in the room with me. And I lost contact with all of my artists. And when I was able to finally emerge on the internet in 1995, Prince had gone through a total change. And when he got rid of Bob Cavallo, his manager, who was a brilliant, brilliant man, and when he got rid of me, Prince lost his connection with his audience and sort of floated off into the ozone like a balloon that you've accidentally let go and you see heading way up into the sky. But he found a way to reconnect with his audience around 1995 by starting the New Power, whatever it was called. And it was an online organization. And in the same way that I could only have life by coming to life online because I lost my physical life, I couldn't walk any further than my bathroom anymore. Prince also was discovering that even though he's afraid of men, he's always been afraid of men. He was 5'2". I mean, imagine what it's like being black and 5'2" in junior high school or high school. You'd have the shit beat out of you all the time. So Prince responded to that by going off and forming his own community where he could be king. He did it in his friend Andre Simone's basement. And his own community was founding on the basis of a philosophy that I had helped bring into the culture in the 1960s when I dropped out of Reed College and accidentally have found a new movement and eventually got a name, the hippie movement. And our slogan was Make Love, Not War. Not that I originated that slogan, I didn't. But Prince picked up on that. And so the ethos, the ruling ethos of that community that Prince was king of in that basement was live out your sexual impulses. The more you live out your sexual impulses, the more you bring peace to Ronald Reagan's world of potential nuclear war. So Prince had always led a group of his own, but he was surrounded by beautiful women. There were no men, or very few men. Andre Simone was a guy. His band members were part of his life. But for the most part, he was afraid of men. So how does a person who's afraid of half 50% of humanity manage to reconnect in 1995? this new thing. It doesn't have web browsers yet. It doesn't have the World Wide Web yet. It's a visually dark place called the internet, because there Prince can reconnect with his audience, the new power generation. That's what Prince called his group. And Prince began a journey that, yes, in a certain way, was never as big as the Prince who came out of Purple Rain, but in its own way was even bigger. I mean, remember, he was able to sell out 12 to 20 dates in London. 12 to 20 dates, that's fucking astonishing.
Yeah, that's
Prince had become a legend. And by following his own, what would you call it? His own inner spirit. By following wherever that inner spirit took him, he was going on a voyage that his audience recognized as their own voyage, because they too had had problems with identity. We've all had problems with identity. We've all sometimes wanted to simply bug out of Chase Rawlings, bug out of Tommy, bug out of Howard Bloom. We've wondered how this curious creature we seem to live with in the body, this Chase Rawlings, what the hell it is. And we all feel alienated and distant at one time or another. Prince was speaking on behalf of that sense of alienation and distance when he symbolized himself, when he went to a different level. His music became a little less coherent to me, because to me, songs like When Doves Cry was the ultimate, or Kiss, because Prince could either do totally black funk, which primarily relies on rhythm and very little melody, or he could do the richness of both melody and rhythm. And that's when, to me, he was richest, when he was doing melody. I mean, one day, Bob Cavallo, his manager, when we were all working on Under the or Purple Rain, and nobody knew what it was going to be exactly. Nobody knew whether it was going to succeed or not. Bob Cavallo said, "I'm coming into New York. I got to play you something tomorrow. You've got to be at my hotel room at 3 o'clock." So I showed up at his hotel room at 3 o'clock. It's 1983, and boomboxes have just been invented. And he has a new gadget that's unlike any you've ever seen before at that point in time, a tiny little miniature boombox. And he sticks a song on and says, "This is the song that Warner Brothers wants to release as the first single from the Purple Rain album." And he plays me a piece of meaningless funk. At least it's meaningless to me, a white guy. And then he plays me When Doves Cry. And even though we don't know what that movie is going to be yet, we don't know what Purple Rain is going to be yet. It's all under wraps. It's all being done in secrecy. You can hear the entire plot of a movie you have never seen in When Doves Cry. It is an astonishing piece of music. It takes you through a whole set of emotional metamorphoses. It twists you, it turns you, it flips you, all in 3.5 minutes. It's an astonishing piece of work.
Yeah,
and
that's great.
Yeah, and whether Prince has anything like that in his subsequent work, I don't know. Because when I put on my Spotify and tell it to play me stuff automatically so I can write my fucking books already, it doesn't play me Prince. So I don't know what his more recent music was like, but I miss him. It's as if he's alive. He will be alive in my heart forever. I mean, one day I got a call from Bob Cavallo, and Bob said, "Look, I haven't seen Prince in a year, but he's coming in to see me tomorrow, and I've got the lyrics for his next album. You're not supposed to know that I've got these lyrics. You're not supposed to see these lyrics. But if by some sort of magic these lyrics show up at 10:30 tomorrow morning in your office, can you tell me what Prince is thinking?" Now, I haven't seen Prince in a year either, but he sends me the lyrics by Federal Express. I go over them, I give him a call, and I tell him what Prince is thinking. Now, how in the world can you do that? Because I regarded my role as a secular shaman. If you're an artist, and Chase, you know this from your wrestling experiences, as an artist, when you go, first of all, we'll go back to a musician. A musician has to write lyrics for his upcoming album. That was never a problem for Prince, because he was writing so many pieces of music every single day, it was ridiculous. But for other artists, it's a problem. So you're a normal artist, and you are on an album deadline, and you're sitting in front of a blank computer screen at 2 p.m, and you know you have to write a lyric, and you know you can't possibly write one. You, in fact, don't really believe you've written any of your lyrics in the past. You're too insecure to imagine that you can write a lyric. And on a good day, by 4 p.m, there's a lyric in front of you. And my job as your secular shaman is to find the gods inside of you who wrote that fucking lyric. And you go on stage in front of an audience. And here's the stuff you can relate to, Chase. You go on stage in front of an audience and you see the pupils and the eyes of the audience growing bigger, and you see their faces melting, and you see them melting into one common envelope of energy. And that envelope of energy reaches a funnel out to you, reaches a tunnel out to you. That energy goes through you. You have an out-of-body experience. You think you're on the ceiling watching this all take place.
Yep.
And the energy goes up to somewhere around your head, is utterly transmogrified into your next move, comes flowing back down through your body to the audience, and you feel that wave of the audience entering, bringing its energy into you again. And you are like a marionette being danced, a puppet being danced on strings for the next however long your performance lasts. And then when you get off stage, it is really hard for you to come back to your normal personality. More hard than anybody who hasn't done this can possibly imagine. My job is to find the gods inside you that danced you in the eyes of that audience. For 10 minutes in the case of wrestling, for 70 minutes in the case of a rock concert.
Yeah, and I'm
also that fits with comedy too, man. That explains being on and killing, and then when you come down and people try to have a regular conversation with you for at least the next hour, you're just like, yeah, well, that's really great, and you know that you're still on stage when you're off, and you're like, I'm sorry, I'm still on.
There's another thing in comedy. I was asked to give a talk at a comedy club of all things, the biggest comedy club in New York. And so I'm standing backstage with the comedians, and I notice something. The comedian backstage is steeling himself for that moment when the spotlight will hit him and the audience will see him as he comes out of the wings. And he is steeling himself to dominate that audience, to do something in his first minute on stage that's going to put the entire audience in his hands. And that is an absolutely crucial moment. If he pulls it off, he can have 30 minutes on stage of success. And if he fails to pull it off, he will be a failure for the next 30 minutes. It's an incredible challenge to watch. It's an incredible transformation to watch from backstage. Have I got that right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. In my head, before I go on stage every time, I play the first part of LL Cool J's Mama Said Knock You Out, that and people, because I'll jump up and down to get my energy up and then center myself by listening to that in my head. And I'm often thinking, like, I wonder if people think I'm praying when really I'm just I'm ready to be like, I'm going to knock you out. And you got to hit that stage and grab them.
Yeah. And it's kind of the same thing. Like, when I would go out, especially if I was the bad guy, like I would start like right as the match before me would be finishing, I would sit there and I would start pacing back and forth. I would kind of pour water over my head, get myself going. I would walk back and forth, and I would just literally play the angriest song that I knew in my head. And, just kind of, you need to get yourself in that character, because once you walk out through that curtain, I could get a call 5 minutes before saying your dad died. But that's the whole thing. Once you walk out that curtain, that doesn't exist anymore. Those fans are paying to see you. So, you get into that mindset. And then when you come back, and what you were saying with the whole fans being, intertwined with everything, I was always told that if the fans are hot, if the fans are into it, it makes the performers work harder. And that's the thing. I've always believed that anything I've ever been to is that if the fans are going absolutely crazy, then they'll sing louder, they'll wrestle harder, they'll tell better jokes. That's just, how it works, because you're feeding off that energy, just how they're feeding off your energy as well.
Right. Yeah, they're having an ecstatic experience. You're having an ecstatic experience. What's an ecstatic experience? The roots of ecstasy are standing outside yourself. So you have this experience where you're not in yourself anymore. You're in something that has infinitely more energy. And that is that combined energy from the audience and that energy from whatever it is that transmogrifies the energy of the audience and turns and puppeteers you. And then Tommy, you were absolutely right. When you come off stage, it's a shocking experience. So John Mellencamp, when he come off stage, would look like he no longer had eyes. He looked like he just had great big empty eye sockets. His face would be skeletal, and he wouldn't let anybody see him. We'd have to usher him backstage to a tiny little room that he could be locked in with just his wife or me, somebody that he really trusted. Because for the next hour, he was not there. For the next hour, that hello, how are you? Fine, thank you very much self of ordinary life wasn't there anymore. And he had to wait for it to slowly return. And to him, it was one of those painful experiences in the world. John also, Mellencamp, is also one of the most explosive performers that I've ever seen in my life. Here's how George Harrison was trying to get Eric Clapton off of heroin. And it wasn't working. He couldn't figure out how to do it. So Peter Townsend, who was the founder of The Who, which was a great big band in the 70s and 80s, Peter Townsend went to Eric Clapton and said, Eric, look, I know why you're pouring this heroin into your veins. You go on stage and for 70 minutes, you have the souls of 70,000 people in the audience flowing through you as if you were an empty pipe up to the Godhead, and then flowing back down to those people again. And the minute you walk off stage, the minute you're behind the curtain and the audience can no longer see you, you're an empty pipe. You've just had 70,000 souls and the Godhood inside of you. And now suddenly you have nothing inside of you, and it hurts. And you try to fill that emptiness with heroin. Well, they did succeed in getting George Harrison off of heroin. But the point is, the performance experiences is one of the strangest, one of the most, well, look, I've been searching for the transcendent experience all of my life. Well, since I was 12 years old. It's an exaggeration to say all of my life. And I mean,
12 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'd been into theoretical physics and microbiology for 2 years. By the time I was 12, I'd been reading 2 books a day. I had accumulated, of all the strange things, scientific credentials. And then I heard there was a book called The Varieties of the Religious Experience. And in Buffalo, in the days before Amazon, Buffalo, New York, my hometown, that was not a book-rich city. It was hard as hell to find that book, but I did find it. And it was if William James, the founder of American psychology, had laid out these examples of the transcendent, the ecstatic experience on a lab table for me and said, I can't explain these in 1905. When you come along over 50 years later, you may have tools with which to explain these better. So I've been searching for the ecstatic experience all my life. And I tripped by accident into the land where the gods inside of us are, into the land where the ecstatic experience existed. I tripped by accident into rock and roll. Me, a theoretical physics and microbiology guy, the most unlikely thing in the world, right?
Yeah.
But a rock concert is where the gods are. And it's because of that experience where you walk into the concert hall and you are painfully conscious of the people on either side of you and the people behind you, and you're trying to look cool. You want them to think you're cool. And you sit down and you're still painfully aware of the people on either side of you and how they're going to perceive you, and even the person behind you and how that person is going to perceive you. And then the lights go down on the audience and the lights go up on the stage. And as an audience member, you slowly feel that self-consciousness melt away. In fact, because it melts away, you don't even feel it. It just happens that it melts away. And you become part of this collective blob of energy. And you do become part of something bigger than yourself, even if it's only for an hour and 10 minutes. It is one of the strangest, most astonishing ecstatic experiences in the history of the world, because it can happen in the case of the Simon and Garfunkel concerts that we did. It can happen up to 250,000 people at a time. So I've been pursuing that from the point of view of science and what's called participant observer science, where you try to experience the thing and become a master at experiencing the thing and then try to understand it scientifically. And that's what my book, Einstein, Michael Jackson, and Me, A Search for Soul in the Power Pits of Rock and Roll is all about. Yes, it is an adventure story. Yes, it is a story about adventuring in the deepest souls of people like Michael Jackson, Prince, Bob Marley, Bette Midler, AC/DC, Aerosmith, Kiss, Queen, Run DMC, Billy Joel, Billy Idol, Paul Simon, Peter Gabriel, etc., ZZ Top, Joan Jett. But under that adventure is this serious quest to find the ecstatic experience, because that ecstatic experience is one of the primary forces of history. It's when people get caught up in something they regard as bigger than themselves that they go, I don't know what to call it, they go surreal. And they become part of a Trump cult, or they become part of a Russian Revolution in 1917, or they become part of something that just lurches history in a whole new direction. So that's what I've been after. And I had a good luck. When I was 16 years old, my parents had seen that, look, I wasn't doing well in school. And there was a good reason. I was reading 2 books a day. And that meant I had to read a book a day under the desk and then go back home and read another book. And there's no way when you're wrapped up in a book, you're going to pay any attention to the teacher. And teachers are not fond of kids who never pay any attention to them. None of us are fond of people who never pay any attention to us. Imagine a person in a wrestling audience who's reading a newspaper and doesn't pay any attention. Not going to feel good. Or in a comedy audience, even worse. So I had a stroke of fortune. My parents decided to send me to a private school and made me promise, in exchange for going to the private school, that I would actually work at school, which I'd never done in my life before. And this school was amazing. It had something called the program committee. Every morning there was a school assembly, 45 minutes before classes started, 5 days a week. And whoever was voted the head of the program committee got to program 2 of these assemblies a week and emceed all 5 of them. And I was voted in my junior year the head of the program committee. That means going up every day in front of an audience of 350 people. And if you remember back to before you were accustomed to going in front of audiences, it scared you shitless. Stage fright was appalling. So I had 4 months of stage fright, and then it became as natural to go in front of 350 people as eating, breathing, and sleeping. So I had this remarkable good fortune. And then the juniors came to me and they said, when I was in my senior year, they elected me the head of this committee again. So the juniors came to me and they said, we're having a dance. Could you please advertise it? And now they didn't understand the irony of what they were asking from me. If there were a social gathering of any kind in my hometown, Buffalo, New York, of people my age, I was cordially invited to stay as far away as possible, preferably Cleveland or Austin, Texas. And they were asking me to advertise this fucking thing that I would be frozen out of. I mean, this is ridiculous. So I put a piece of music on the turntable the next day, and I went in front of that audience. Now you have to understand something. I cannot dance. I am physically incompetent in so many ways that it's ridiculous. It's a miracle I can walk. I cannot do the box step. I cannot do the foxtrot. I cannot do the waltz. I just cannot dance. So I decided to dance in front of this audience. And since I cannot dance, that means everything that I do is something you've never seen a human do before in your life, because I cannot do the things that humans do. So apparently it was like a Looney Tune drawn on a night when Chuck Jones, the guy who used to draw the Looney Tunes, had dropped acid. And I saw the face of the girl who hated me the most in the school melt. And I saw the faces of these other 350 kids who hated me melt. And I saw them melt into a common blob of energy. And I saw that energy come through me as if it was coming through a pseudopod from an amoeba. And I had an out-of-body experience. I was on the ceiling watching this whole thing take place. And I saw that energy go up to my head and be utterly transformed and go back down to the audience in this reverberatory loop. And when I finished 3.5 minutes later,
they all had no faces.
It was even crazier than that. This audience did something it had never done in my time in that school before and would never do again. It crowded down to the stage. It picked me up on its shoulders as if it had been practicing this for years, and carried me out of the auditorium and carried me all the way up the hill to the building where we had our classes, and only then did it let me down. It was astonishing. It was astonishing. So I always had an idea. I'd been in pursuit of this since I was 12 years old. The fact that it actually hit me and happened to me was an absolute accident. But it was an astonishing accident, and it allowed me to see into the souls of Michael Jackson, Prince, Bob Marley, all these people. Why? Because when you are a secular shaman, you are trying to find the gods inside of your client. And you're then trying to find the part of you empathically that is the gods inside of your client. So when a Bob Cavallo calls you and says, I have Prince's lyrics and you're not supposed to see them, but if they show up on your desk at 10:15 tomorrow, can you tell me what Prince is thinking? The answer is always yes. Why? Because as Prince is evolving, this part of you, inside of you, that is Prince, keeps evolving too. And it makes you the closest thing to an empath you can imagine in this secular universe without gods and supernatural forces or anything like that to account for it. But you too have come as close to the supernatural as humans get in the performance experience. And so have I. And it's been my job to nurture people so they get to see the soul inside of them. So they get to see the gods inside of them. And so they don't do anything to dishonor those gods. And what I mean by that is this. One day, John Mellencamp called. Now, John Mellencamp almost never called me. Never. And he said, look, I've just been offered $1.25 million by Heinz Ketchup. Heinz Ketchup in those days came in glass bottles. Yeah. And glass bottles.
Had to hit it right on the neck. Right on the neck.
Yeah. No way you can get the ketchup out of there. It takes you half an hour. Your hamburger is cold. They're closing the restaurant by the time the ketchup begins to come. So they decided to make lemonade out of lemons. And they used Carly Simon's song Anticipation to make this a sign of just how good Heinz ketchup is. The harder it is to get it out of the bottle, the better the ketchup is, right? Yeah. And the next song they wanted to use for this was Hurt So Good. So John said, should I take the $1.25 million? And I said, John, what do you want to be doing in 15 years? Do you want to be collecting the interest on your investments, or do you want to be performing in front of audiences? And John said, I want to be performing in front of audiences. And I said, okay, you have to turn down the ketchup ad. And here's why. You go in front of an audience, and you raise your fist. And when you raise your fist, you're speaking on behalf of everyone in that audience, and you're making a statement. And that statement is, imagine the city of Jerusalem back in the days of Isaiah with tall, tall walls. And you are 15 years old, 16 years old. You are locked out of those walls, for God's sake. You don't share in the power of the people behind those walls, and they're not going to let you in. So you stand out in the wilderness where they basically locked you out and said, you're a nobody. Get out of here. You're just dandruff on the scalp of society. And you raise your fist and say, I have a right to exist. I have an identity. You cannot stomp on me as if I were an insect. I am a person of potential power. And that's what you represent to your audience, who are kids, 12 years old. Kids at the age of 12 years old are locked out of the walls of society because they're being thrust out of their families by biological forces. And they haven't found their own feet yet. They haven't found their own source of strength yet. And they are being told that they are worthless and dandruff on the scalp of society. And you say, I am not dandruff. I have a right to exist. Well, the minute you take that Heinz ketchup ad, instead of being outside the walls of the establishment saying this, you are inside the walls at the dinner parties of the establishment. And you no longer can speak on behalf of those kids anymore. So if you want to lose those kids and what you do for them, by all means, take the $1 million. If you still want to be the spokesperson for those kids, then you cannot take that money. So John turned down the ketchup ad, and he lost his manager over it. Billy Bass, who was the manager for Rod Stewart at that point, was huge. But he took the stance that reflected his inner gods. If he had proven untrue to those inner gods, he would have lost the ground on which he stood. He would have been like Samson losing his hair in the Bible. So my job was to find the gods inside you who dance you on stage, and to put you in touch with those gods inside of you, and to keep you true to those gods inside of you, and to let you know, as you're getting older, you're changing into a different kind of human. And each time you change into a different kind of human, a teenager, to a young adult, to a middle-aged adult, to an elderly adult, every time you go through one of those biological changes, the gods inside of you change in a subtle way too. So I'm going to have to come back if I'm working with you every year and find what those gods inside of you are now and introduce you to those gods so you can stay true to them. So they're not another stranger to you. So when you come off stage, you are not like a totally dissociated being who just experienced a part of himself that has disappeared and he can't access anymore. You know, the way you wake up from dreams and you can't remember them. That's half your or a third of your life.
Yeah.
And a third of your life is inaccessible to you. My job is to make a part of the most vital part of your life, the gods inside of you, accessible to you. What you feel in the ecstatic experience, accessible to you. And my job as a science person is to try to understand what role that plays in the evolution of this cosmos.
And real quick, what we got to do is we need to take a break real quick for everybody listening at home. We'll be back in 1 second. We're going to play a song and a couple of sponsors for those of you listening at home, and we will be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Happy Hour podcast. Of course, I'm Ray, aka Chase Rawlings. I'm here with Tommy Sinbazo and Howard Bloom. What we're going to do real quick is we are going to get into our beer of the week. So our beer of the week, of course, I'm here all by myself drinking this week. Our beer of the week is Molson Canadian. Just simple and right to the point. Molson Canadian is the beer of the week. And of course, our shot of the moment has changed. And Tommy, we used to do the shot of the month, but I have so much liquor built up in my damn refrigerator that I told Matt, I'm like, look, dude, we're just going to do these shots until we run out because people send us product. So at least doing that way, you know, we have like maybe 8 episodes where their products featured. Yeah. So I was like, let's do the worst fucking one first.
What is that? It has horses on it.
The Polo Club Gin, which tastes the way fucking aftershave smells. So yeah, so our current feature.
Wait, smell it. Smell it. Does it smell like does it smell like Polo Cologne?
It smells like your red comedy pants after a long night of sweaty comedy.
They were pretty toasty. I went to go unzip to piss in the bathroom and like a skull ghost came out of it. Like, oh man, that looked enjoyable.
Jesus Christ, this is like the worst that we have, and I really don't want to do this one again. But I was like, I can't let it go to waste either. So, oh Jesus Christ! What we're gonna do is we're gonna get into our game segment. Of course, Tommy, you know how this works. Howard, I explained this to you a little bit before we went live. What we're going to do is we're going to start off with 5-second rule. So pretty much I'm going to tell you to name 3 things from a certain category, and you have 5 seconds to name them. So, Howard, what I want you to do is I don't know how familiar you are with cartoons, but
not at all.
But what I want you to do is I want you to try your best to name 3 Rugrats characters starting now.
What are Rugrats characters? I've never even heard of them.
Howard does not know Rugrats.
We've got dust mites in our rugs. Is that what we're talking about? Wearing little masks, doing their own comedy routines?
All right, so Tommy.
Yeah.
Now it's going to go to you.
Okay.
If you don't get it, it comes to me.
All right.
Rugrats characters starting now.
Tommy, Chucky, Reptar.
There we go.
Okay.
Easy. And you know what? Tommy Sinbazo has never lost a round of this game anytime he's ever come on. So what we're going to do now.
You always make me go second, and I have time to think about it.
So I'm going to go ahead and pin myself. We're going to go on to our game called Incoherent. So, Howard, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold up a card, and it's going to be in drunk lingo. Unfortunately, a lot of our guests are not drunk when they play this game. So pretty much what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this up. And you're going to sound it out the best that you can. But listen to yourself as you sound it out. And there's also 2 hints on the back. And Tommy, if you want to do it too, I know sometimes you guys will help each other out and try to figure out what it is. But if you need the hints on the back, let me know.
Unicorn. Unicorn.
He's got the first part.
Unicorn pubic hair is what we got so far. And I missed the
unicorn pubic hair. Unicorn furret bush.
So the first hint is a magical drink.
Unicorn. Unicorn frappuccino.
Yes. Okay. Tommy
Sinbazo. Excellent.
The second hint was a rainbow drink created by Starbucks when they realized spelled my name wrong ploy was losing IG traction.
Oh my God, I don't know any Starbucks drinks at all.
Yeah, I know.
A frappe, a frappuccino or something like that, but that's about it.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get myself unpinned. Am I still pinned or? Yeah, I'm still pinned. So let me go ahead and unpin myself and then remove pin. There we go. All right. So the last part of our games is Cards Against Humanity. Howard, have you ever heard of Cards Against Humanity?
No, not in my life.
All right. So this is where it gets really fun. We always save the worst for last. So Howard, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you off the face card, and then you have 4 options on what you think best answers the card. So the card is as follows. For hunting in the king's forest, I hereby sentence you to death by blank. And your choices are a Puerto Rican Minotaur from the Bronx, a little girl with a knife,
Amazing.
country music legend Toby Keith, and ejaculating a quart of hollandaise sauce.
Toby Keith.
And I think the Puerto Rican Minotaur from the Bronx would be mine. Now that's the way I would not want to be taken out in the King's Forest and sentenced to death by. What about you, Tommy?
I wanted to go with the Minotaur as well, but I guess I'll have to go with Little Girl of the Night.
I mean, you can still go with the Minotaur.
And I'm going with the Minotaur. Who doesn't want to die by Minotaur?
And Howard, of course, you have we had a promo video that was sent to us. And what caught my mind in the promo video was the grand unified theory of everything in the universe, including the human soul. What goes into that? Like I said, and my mind just literally like, I was like, I'm having an out of body experience just watching this, just hearing this. How did you come down to, and of course you were sick, you had chronic fatigue syndrome for a very long time. It took you out of commission, and then you started writing, and then you came across this. You have a couple of books out. You have The Global Brain, you have
books all together.
You have the 60s, and then you have that. Like, how do you even, I feel like that we're about to have an out of this world or out of body experience.
It started when I was 12 years old, and my parents sent me off to this interview for this fancy private school that had 66 square acres of greenery. And the headmaster was this dark, enigmatic figure who hid in the shadows and wore a tweed jacket and a pipe and had gone to Harvard. And he tried to make himself look enigmatic and tremendously imposing. And I said, look, I will only come to your school on the following terms. First of all, you teach me Russian.
You listen to me, you son of a bitch.
because Russia is going to be important in the future. This is 1955. And second, you reverse the order of your science courses. You teach me, instead of teaching me biology first, chemistry second, and physics third, you teach me physics first. So you teach me the story of the Big Bang and the origin of the elementary particles. You teach me chemistry next. So you teach me what those elementary particles did when they danced and socialized and congregated with each other. You teach me biology next, because you teach me what those socializations of elementary particles produced in the way of DNA and cell membranes and life. Then you teach me anthropology. So you teach me the origins of human culture. And then you teach me history, because that's what comes after primitive human culture. And what I was essentially demanding of him is, you tell me the story of the universe and everything that's in it, from pubic hair on unicorns to the poetry of Andrew Marvell, and how it all fits with physics, chemistry, biology, the whole damn thing in one big picture. And I've been pursuing that. God knows where that came from in me when I said it to that headmaster. But that's the pursuit I've been on for the rest of my life, building a timeline that has everything in it, including the ecstatic experience and the experience of comedians and wrestlers when they go on stage.
Yeah. And you know what's funny, like, and backtracking a little bit, is that, I'm from Maryland, and Tommy's from Maryland, and, you worked with Joan Jett,
right.
Girl. So, Maryland, and I don't know if you know this or not, but Maryland ruined the national anthem. But I feel like we're entitled to that because it's ours. It was written here. Francis Scott Key wrote it. He's from Maryland. It's ours. And the point is every time I went to the Orioles game yesterday, I'm a huge Orioles fan. We were talking a little bit before we went online about, you saw some of the cords hanging. And I said, I have a bunch of, Orioles like bar signs and all that. And every time you go to an Orioles game, they do the national anthem and we yell Oh, as loud as, and I've heard Joan Jett do that. She would like, let's say she would be, opening up for the Seattle Seahawks, singing the national anthem there, and she would yell "oh" as loud as she can. And it's actually funny that it's transitioned so much that it doesn't matter what playoffs or no matter what you're watching on TV. Whenever the national anthem happens, you hear at least one random person in the background go, "oh," and you're like, that fucking guy's from Maryland. Yep. Like straight up. He is from Baltimore. He is from Maryland. And that's the thing. Like we'll go places and we will do it. Like I went to Nationals Park. We did it there. We did it at Phillies Park. We did it at Yankees Park. And just the look that we get from people. Like we could have literally just whipped out the Constitution and just pissed all over it. Like that's the whole, like that's the look that we get. And I just sit there and I'm looking at it. I'm like, look, this is ours. All right. If we want to alter this, we will. But now,
this is the remix.
Yeah. They're like, what is this? We're like, it's the Orioles. Oh, I loved hearing Joan Jett do it. And, Joan Jett, it's funny. My wife, the first year we were together, she was Joan Jett for Halloween. And that just goes to show we've been together for going on 11 years now. And our first Halloween, I was Alan from The Hangover. This goes to show our personalities. Right. I was Alan from The Hangover, and she was Joan Jett. So, that it's just crazy how all those years later, she just, and she's still getting it. Like, I think just a couple of years ago, she performed at Heritage Fair, not too far from here in Dundalk.
So what is the Maryland complaint against the national anthem?
No, we just changed the part where it goes, oh, say does that Star Spangled, that part, that O in the middle of it. Yeah. If you're from Maryland, it's just bred into you that you turn into a werewolf at that point. You just go,
at that point, literally. And Howard, I don't know if you're into baseball or anything like that, but if you ever have a chance, go to Oriole Park at Camden Yards, and a capacity crowd when you're there and they do the national anthem, just hearing everybody and as you said, the out-of-body experience stuff, everybody is just tuned that the second that happens, everybody in the stadium is just like, oh, yeah. And singers who didn't know we did that, and it would fuck them up so bad. Like they would kind of stumble words a little bit afterwards because they didn't know that we did that during the anthem. And it's just it's insane. But I heard Joan do it a couple of times, some of the stuff she did it, and I'm like, that's just the thing. It's like just proud of where you're from, like, and I mean, Howard, of course, we're running a little bit short on time. I know you said before we went on you have a couple other things to do. I don't want to run over.
But I ask one question. Can I ask you one question? Howard, I didn't know anything about you before this interview, and I got to say, you totally fascinating, because I was always one of the ones that when I first started doing comedy, I would read comedy books, and they said to write from your F zone. You have to write there has to be a way that you have to tap into that funniest part of you when you are about to writing a joke or whatever. And it actually takes comedians a few years before they find what's called their voice, which is when they can tap into that otherworldly experience. And we need, do you have any quick tips or tricks if any comedians are listening or any artists or whatever to help them tap into their muse?
Well, my guess is right from the fuck you zone.
Yeah.
Because actually, research illustrates that there's a different part of your brain that comes into action when you start fucking and shitting and pissing, when you start using curse words.
Okay. All right. I'm on the right path so far.
Of your personality. And look at Billy Joel. His best songs came from his anger with his wife. And as long as he was writing from that anger zone, he was writing brilliant, astonishing songs. So try out the fuck you zone and see if it helps.
I'll try out the fuck you zone.
And actually, I meant to ask, and you said on a pre-show, we were talking about it. You were talking about the show, and Aline Shapiro, shout out to her from World Star PR. She's the one who hooked you up with us, and she provided all of our guests for the month of August. You were telling me that when you looked up the show, what was intriguing to you was was that we tagged our show with pornography because we have a lot of adult film stars. Tommy knows, he's been on with some of the adult film stars. You know, we have a lot of lovely adult film stars on the show. So what was it that, you know, when you brought up the pornography stuff that,
well, here's the deal. Let's go to my science. Okay.
Here we go, Howard. Here's the part you came for, buddy.
If you take 20 rats, 10 males and 10 females, and you put them in a cage, one male rat is going to beat the shit out of 9 of the male rats and come out on top. Yeah. And when it comes time to fuck the females, guess who's going to do all the fucking? There are 10 females, one male rat's going to do all the fucking.
Yeah.
Well, what does that mean for the other 9 male rats?
Yeah. They have sperm,
they have sexual desires. What do they do with all of this surplus that's being neglected, that's being thrown away by nature, by evolution? Yeah. Give them pornography.
Yes.
Recognize the
value off in the corner. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So pornography has a much greater positive role to play in society than we think.
Yeah. And it's funny because the trailer video that Elaine showed us is that you are you still on a dating market? Are you still looking for a girlfriend? Because
no, my girlfriend lives in Maryland.
Oh, does she?
Oh, nice.
We're in Maryland.
I can't remember the name of her county. I don't know, St. Elizabeth's County or something.
Okay, that's Southern Maryland.
St. Mary's?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, I mean, the bizarre thing is that this is sort of giving me this retinue of in-laws, her family. I mean, we're not married, but we've been together for 14 months or something like that. And it's as if you took the hillbillies out of the Ozarks, the Jukes and the Calicacs, people who are marrying their own daughters and shooting at each other constantly. It's as if you took them, moved them to the shores of the Chesapeake Bay, gave them pickup trucks and cell phones, and let them loose.
Yeah, I call them riverbillies. The whole area is just riverbillies.
It is bizarre. It is bizarre.
Maryland is its own unique beast, but everybody loves it. Like, I mean, that's the thing. I have yellow walls. I have a Maryland themed basement. Tommy's been to my house from when he was featured on the show. You know, I mean, that's the thing. When you're from Maryland, like, we have one of the best flags around. You know, everybody just loves being here, regardless of all the murder that we have. You know, we have a good.
There's a bit of murder.
Yeah. What a statement.
Take the good with the bad. We got a good flag, but there's murder.
Yeah. Howard, if you're ever in town, man, hit us up. Like, I'm sure Tommy, like, I'd love to go out. I don't know if you drink, but I would love to go out and have a couple of drinks with you and just talk. Like, I know.
I want to do shrooms with you. You want to get weird in the woods? Do some shrooms?
Yeah. Tommy has this mushroom drink that he normally takes.
I make a tea.
Just sends him off into a different planet. And as I was telling you, like, you know, I feel like, I know my other co-host, Maddie's going to be like, oh man, like, because he used to get really drunk and just talk about all this outworldly shit. Right. And I know he's going to be like, man, I wish I would have been there. And the thing is, if he was here, we would have went till 11 o'clock because he would have just started just going with everything. And Howard, like, as I said, I appreciate it. I know you have some other things going on. For everybody listening at home, we will be back next Sunday. Next Sunday, we will be back at 4 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Pacific time. Our guest is Sherry Nelson. She's a model and an actress. She will be joining us live on the program. And, Matt will be back. So, and of course, Howard, thank you for everything. We definitely need to have you on again. Because I'm still intrigued. All the stuff, like, we couldn't even cover half the stuff, just in 1 hour. But I know you're busy, and of course, it's the Happy Hour podcast. So, but I appreciate it. And where can everybody find you? In case anybody listening at home or watching at home wants to look, find some of your books, find all your stuff with your Publicist stuff. Where can they find you?
To find my books, the best thing to do is go to Amazon.com, and it's Howard Bloom, BLOOM. You can go to howardbloom.net, and that'll tell you just about everything that you ever wanted to know, and could keep you reading stuff that's bizarrely different from all the other stuff on there for hours. Yeah.
All right, sweet. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and wrap up. And Howard, would you be able to hang out for 1 second?
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Yep.
ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on the Happy Hour podcast. Of course, thank you for Tommy Sinbazo from the Laugh Finder podcast.
Oh, thanks.
Always a pleasure to hang out. Tommy's one of our favorite guys to hang out with. Of course, Eric as well. Ashley Pontius will be joining us in October. So a lot of the Laugh Finder crew is making their way onto the show, and this is about making a lot of new friendships. We told you that the 1 year anniversary, Tommy, is that I love the fact that we're making a lot of new friends through this. But anyways, we will see you guys right here on Facebook Live and wherever you find your podcast next week. Thank you for tuning in. Of course, I'm Ray. For Tommy, for Howard, thank you for listening to the Happy Hour podcast. All right, we are no longer live, Howard. That was awesome.
Yeah, it was great, man. Howard. Oh,
yeah.
I'm gonna read some of your stuff. I really, yeah.
And real quick, would you be able to say this is Howard Bloom and you're listening to the Happy Hour podcast? We drop those in on every episode.
Yes, absolutely. So
awesome. Whenever you're ready,
we'll do it 3 times. So this is Howard Bloom. I want you to listen to the Happy Hour podcast.
Awesome.
Want to try another couple just in case?
Yeah.
Okay. This is Howard Bloom. Listen to the Happy Hour podcast. That's my 1940s radio voice. Howard Bloom says, listen to the Happy Hour podcast. That should give you some choices.
Oh, that's great.
Honestly, man, I appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy. When I started looking a lot of your stuff up, I was very excited because I was like, this is just going to be fun. As I said, I don't really take down a lot of notes. Tommy knows the way we roll. We just kind of, get on, have fun, laugh, and just have a good time. So, Howard, I appreciate it. I hope you want to come back on in the future.
Oh, I'd love to come back on.
Oh, it's great. Because doing comedy, I'm sorry, my internet dropped out for some reason.
Yeah.
I missed
it's
it.
Funny because I was gonna say, when you were talking about it, you were talking about having like an out of body experience with the crowd, and I'm like, Tommy's having an out of body experience right now.
I'm done. I left. No, but I if you're working like a big room of like 300 some people, and you're just crushing, and the only way I could describe to people is that I'm not in myself. I'm sitting up behind myself, and while my mouth is going through the motions of telling jokes, there's the other part of me that's like, okay, you made a reference to this and this guy made a face. There might be something in there. If you do crowd work with him, you can dig it out of him. And it's sort of like I'm in the back seat telling the driver which way to go.
Right. It's the tale of the multiple selves, which is a whole other story for a whole other time.
And what's funny is the same thing, Tommy, and I'll say this real quick, and then we'll let you go, Howard, is that, in a wrestling match, it's the same thing. You have a guy in a headlock, you're sitting there, you have him in a headlock, you're kind of feeding him a little bit of directions, but you're also looking around at the crowd. And you're looking at the crowd, you're looking for that guy, especially if you're a bad guy, who's the most into it, who's sitting there yelling the most for that guy. And then you sit there, you're like, that's the guy I'm going to target. And that's the point that, throughout the whole entire match, you screw with that guy. Because if you can get him to hate you, then the rest of the crowd's going to follow. It's like, you sit there and, the guy says something that's like, hey, why don't you tell your mother, whatever, or something like that. Right. And that guy's going to get bent out of shape. And that's just the magic of doing it. So, I like that, you've been around that and you were able to convey that not only in the music, but in the comedy, but also in the wrestling. It shows everybody, you've been around for a long time. And I meant to ask you when you're on air, did you have some sort of magical pen when you did your Publicist stuff? Because so many people ended up with gold records after you represented them. And it's like, what kind of magic, were you it was some sort of magic. They got hooked up with you and then boom, gold record. That's, right. So
that's a long story. And it comes to how you, again comes down to the gods inside of you. Yeah. And some of those gods have truths. Yeah. Those truths are accurate. Look, one day I'm in San Diego and I've been working for 3 years with the 11th president of India, who's a superstar in South Asia. He's regarded as the only politician in the history of South Asia, the only honest politician in the history of South Asia.
We're gonna have a lot of those.
He's called the people's president. And he and I have been working together for 4 years. I put him together with Buzz Aldrin, among other things. And then I had a falling out with my intermediary, who could chew you apart like a cat, just slash you to ribbons. and I was tired of being slashed. So I thought that the president of India wasn't going to want to have anything to do with me because I wasn't getting along with his intermediary. And then I get a summons, and the summons says, Dr. Kalam wants to see you. So I go up to Dr. Kalam's suite. You know, there's a long line of people going through security, waiting to get in. Each one is getting 15 minutes. And I arrive at the suite, and Dr. Kalam is talking to some very important people. And I don't want to interrupt because I'm a nobody. So I try to find a seat on the wall where I won't be seen. And Dr. Kalam's eyes meet mine. And this, Chase, this is ridiculous. Tommy, I've never met this man before. We've been communicating by email, but he's not supposed to communicate with me. That's against protocol for him to directly communicate with somebody. He's supposed to go through level A and level B of diplomacy to talk to me. And he's discarded all of that. And his eyes light up as if he has known me since I was 6 years old. And he loses total interest in the people that he's with immediately. Yeah. And he walks out of this little group of important people and comes over, and there are certain rules of diplomacy with a former head of state, for Christ's sake. And he breaks every single one of them. He gives me a huge hug. And then he dismisses these really important people. Now, Dr. Kalam, when he read my book, The Genius of the Beast, said it was a visionary creation, and he just used the word visionary 12 times in a long email quote, you know, extolling the virtues of this book. He was absolutely blown away by the book. So Dr. Kalam gives me the introduction he's just written to a book. And he stands 12 inches away from me, and he's looking into my eyes, and he wants to see my face as I read it. Why? He wants to see if I light up to his words the way he lit up to mine. Why? Because in his eyes, there is a very special meaning to a visionary. A visionary is a person who has visions that pierce the veil of the normal. And he knows he does that. And he wants to see if I do that, if I light up to his words, if I see the visionary in him the way he saw the visionary in me. And he gives me this sudden sense of what a visionary is. And of course, my face does light up because it's amazing. The work is brilliant. I begin to see what he's talking about when he uses the word visionary. Well, it all comes down to having these visions of absolute truths. You can't control them. You can't summon them. They either hit you or they don't. And once you have one, following it through to the nth degree, step by step, by step, by step, knowing that truth with absolute precision. How you know it is utterly beyond me. And it's a mystery that my science and even my musings, you know, even my poetry can't pierce.
Yeah.
As yet. But someday I got to solve that problem.
And Howard, I know you're a busy guy. We're going to go ahead and let you go. As I said, dude, 100%. If you're ever in Maryland, hit me up. I'll hit Tommy up. We got to go have a drink.
You'll get some crabs.
Some, like outside world shit. Because honestly, man, I'm so interested. As I said before, you know, when we started, we're booked into January. I would love to have you back as soon as possible. So maybe February, March, something like that. We can have you back on and just, you know, just let loose. We're talking about out of this world type stuff. So
that sounds neat to me. Set her up with Eileen. I will be there.
Awesome. I appreciate it, man. Thank you. Enjoy. And hopefully you had a good time, and we'll see you next time, man.
Pleasure meeting you, Howard.
All right.
Have a great night. I'll see you again soon.
All right. See you. All right. Bye. Tommy, you gonna hang out for a minute?
No, I gotta eat and do stuff.
Dude, there for a second, and I'm gonna let you go in a minute because I have
yeah, you're fine.
But there for a minute, I was just kind of like, what the fuck's happening?
Yeah, I was like, I don't want to interrupt him with any jokes because
yeah. Like
I'm gonna miss what he's saying.
Yeah. Like literally, like I told him before we went on because he was cool. Like before we went on,
yeah.
I was like, I feel like we're just gonna have an out of body experience, and how cool he was. I was like, we're not gonna have to do any work at all. Like that's the whole thing. But he's just such an interesting guy.
Yeah,
and I was like, this could easily spiral out. And he said that like Elaine had him like, you know, scheduled to do like 3 other things tonight.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, fuck, like, you know, this could easily spiral out to be like a 3 fucking hour episode.
Yeah.
This dude's just gonna keep a rolling. And I'm just kind of like at some point I was just kind of like, are we on Tommy's magic mushroom?
Yeah, I want to see. I want to read. I want to read some of his stuff now.
Yeah. Like, dude,
Wow, he was cool.
As I said, like I feel kind of bad because you dedicated your Sunday night and like you
I
didn't really get to say much. But
I don't care. That was I had a great time listening to him. I go watch a seminar that he was talking about. If he was a cult leader, I would be in that cult. That'd be my second cult.
Yes, 100%. If he ever has a cult, we are in.
Yep,
Like,
I'm in. I'm here first day. Dude, first day.
Like,
I want a single digit number.
I'm gonna text everybody when we're done. Like, I don't know what the fuck just happened, but you gotta watch. Like, I don't know what this is, but you gotta watch. So,
all right, bud. I'm gonna hop off.
All right, brother. Thank you. I appreciate
Thanks, Henry, man.
Yeah, man.
Give your wife a squeeze for me.
I will. All right.
See you.